Have you ever watched someone try to shut down a story and accidentally turn it into the only story anyone talked about for a week? That is exactly what happened when Donald Trump Jr. sent Jimmy Kimmel a cease and desist letter, and Kimmel read it out loud on live television. Trump Jr. walked into the segment believing he held the leverage. He walked out having handed Kimmel the best material of the month. By the time the El Capitan audience finished laughing, the letter he had sent to silence the show had been viewed 14 million times, printed in 17 news outlets, and turned into a monologue that every late-night competitor spent the following week trying to match. The letter arrived at Kimmel's production office on a Tuesday morning, standard legal letterhead. A cease and desist demanding that Kimmel stop making jokes about Donald Trump Jr., specifically the fraud trial jokes, specifically the testimony jokes, specifically the segment where Kimmel had noted that Don Jr., on the stand in the $250 million fraud case, had described his father as an artist with real estate. The letter cited reputational damage. It cited distress. It used the phrase malicious intent in the second paragraph and irreparable harm in the third. Kimmel received it, read it once, and put it in his jacket pocket. That night, he walked to his desk, sat down, reached into his jacket, removed the letter, unfolded it, slowly, with the specific, unhurried deliberateness of a man who has been thinking about this moment since 10 a.m., and began reading it aloud to 400 people and several million more watching from home. He did not editorialize. He did not add commentary between paragraphs. He simply read it in the flat, even tone of a man reading a document that is doing its own work without assistance. By the second paragraph, the audience was laughing. By the third, they were not laughing at the jokes. There were no jokes. They were laughing at the letter itself, at the specific quality of a legal document that had been designed to project authority and was, in the reading, projecting the opposite. You could feel the shift before you could name it. Somewhere around paragraph 4, the laughter changed register. Lower, more sustained, the frequency of people who have just understood that the funniest thing in the room is the thing that tried hardest to be serious. Kimmel finished reading. He folded the letter. He placed it on the desk. He looked at the camera with the expression of a man who has just been handed the cleanest possible illustration of the point he has been making for 3 years. He said, "Don Jr., buddy, I want you to know I got this." He paused. He said, "And I want you to know I understand." He said, "When you're sitting in a courtroom describing your father as an artist with real estate, while the prosecutor is holding evidence of a $250 million fraud, you need wins wherever you can find them." The audience broke completely. Now, rewind. 3 weeks earlier, the fraud trial. Don Jr. on the stand. The moment Kimmel had been working with since the testimony transcript dropped. He had spent 4 minutes on it the night it happened. The artist with real estate line. The specific quality of a son compelled by circumstance to produce the most generous possible characterization of a man whose legal situation was not generating many other generous characterizations. Kimmel had said, "He's an artist. Vincent Van going to jail." He said it once, cleanly, let it sit. Don Jr. had watched that segment, had clocked the line, had called someone. The cease and desist had been drafted, signed, and delivered within 72 hours of the broadcast. What Don Jr. had not calculated was the inventory of what that letter would produce when read aloud. He had calculated the threat. He had not calculated the reading. The inventory, as it turned out, was this: a document that confirmed the joke had landed, confirmed the subject was paying close enough attention to feel it, confirmed that the response to feeling it was not a counter-argument, but a legal suppression attempt, and confirmed, most importantly, most devastatingly, that the attempt had been made in writing, on letterhead, and could therefore be read aloud on live television to millions of people who would not otherwise have sought out a monologue about a fraud trial transcript. Kimmel said later that week, "He made me more famous." He said, "I've been doing this for 20 years. Nobody makes me more famous than the people who try to stop me." The clips from the RNC book purchase surfaced that same week. $94,800 in Republican National Committee funds spent on Don Jr.'s book triggered in the days before its release, the purchase that had manufactured its bestseller status. Kimmel had covered it when it happened. Now it was running beside the cease and desist clips in threads that needed no editorial direction. The inventory assembled itself. The fraud trial testimony, the book purchase, the legal letter, the reading, the audience's laughter. Each item is beside the others. No annotation required. Don Jr. posted before midnight. He called Kimmel a hack. He called the show dying. He said the audience was paid. He used the word gobbler, which Kimmel had been calling him for months, the specific nickname that had lodged itself in the public consciousness, the way only a perfectly chosen nickname can, the kind that the subject hates precisely because there is something accurate at the center of it. Each post was screenshotted within 90 seconds and placed beside the cease and desist reading. The juxtaposition did not require a caption. A man calling a comedian a hack beside a 14 million view clip of that comedian reading the man's own legal letter says everything the caption would have said, and says it better. Trump posted separately. He called Kimmel a zero-talent bum and said the show had no audience and the network was a disgrace. His post used 5 more sentences than Don Jr.'s. Both were placed beside the same clip. 2 men, senior and junior, described the same comedian as a failure while the comedian's clip was running at 14 million views and climbing. The WikiLeaks joke ran that same week, Kimmel noting that Don Jr. had once confused WikiLeaks with Nene Leaks from The Real Housewives, had thought he was being contacted by a reality television personality, had responded enthusiastically before realizing. It ran beside the cease and desist. The inventory of a man who sends legal letters to stop jokes about him, sitting beside the jokes about him. The jokes in the sitting beside became funnier. The letters in the sitting beside became less functional. The DOJ check had arrived the same month, $51, bearing Trump's name, from the FTC Amazon settlement. Kimmel had pulled it from his jacket on air and said that, typically, to receive a check with Trump's name on it, you had to spank him with a magazine and promise to keep it secret. The line ran everywhere. It had nothing to do with Don Jr. and everything to do with the family's specific relationship to documentation, to receipts, to paper trails, to things that arrive in the mail bearing names attached to things the bearers of those names would prefer not to be attached to. Then there were the 53 withheld pages, the FBI interviews, the DOJ's decision to redact and suppress material connected to accusations against the president. Kimmel had addressed it directly, had said on air that the best thing for the president, who he was sure had done nothing wrong, was to order the documents released so everyone could see how innocent he was. He said it the way he says everything, evenly, with the flat delivery of a man presenting an argument he finds entirely reasonable and inviting anyone to explain why it isn't. Don Jr. did not send a cease and desist about that segment. The silence about the 53 pages, set beside the letter about the fraud trial jokes, formed its own inventory, its own account of what the family chose to suppress and what it chose not to. Suppression is a form of speech. It says, this one matters enough to try to stop. The stop attempt says, I know this one lands. The landing of the attempt says, the joke was accurate. Kimmel kept reading receipts. The family kept delivering them. That was the dynamic that Kimmel described in the week after the letter aired as the most reliable relationship he had in late-night television. He said, I don't have to look for material. It comes certified on letterhead with a return address. He said, the inventory writes itself. He said the word once at the end of the week's final monologue, looking at the camera with the eye contact of a man who has been in this room for 20 years and knows with complete certainty that the people watching understand exactly what he means. The inventory writes itself. Every letter, every post, every artist with real estate, every gobbler tweet, every $94,800 purchase, every withheld page, every cease and desist that becomes a punchline. Each one a line item, documented, time-stamped, placed in the public record by the people it was meant to protect. You can't delete receipts that have already been read aloud. You can't unsend a letter that has been unfolded on live television. You can send another one. Don Jr. has not. If this changed how you see power, hit subscribe. If it didn't, watch it again. The details you missed the first time are the ones that matter most. Notifications on. The next one drops soon.